Speaker, and in doing so with some indulgence, I also look forward to the member for Werribee's first speech very soon too. I'm delighted to rise as the first government speaker on the MPI today, and the first time as the member moving the MPI in that respect as well, which is that this House states, hold your fire, we've got plenty of time, member for Brighton, that this House notes that the Allen Labor Government is helping working families with the cost of living by making much-needed investments in health, education, housing and transport. And Speaker, this MPI is of the utmost importance to all Victorians across the state and, of course, my community of Pascoe Vale, Coburg and Brunswick West, because cost of living is the #1 issue. But as many Victorians are acutely aware, many of these cost of living issues have largely been driven by a number of international, national and external factors. International geopolitical conflicts and tensions, which continue to impact demand and confidence across parts of our economy through supply chains, especially global energy markets. The ongoing effects of a 1 in a 100-year global pandemic, which continues to impact economies and levels of inflation and spending around the world and Australia. The 13 interest rate hikes that have been unfairly imposed on Victorian households by the Reserve Bank, and even though we have had some modest relief in recent times, many are still feeling the burden of those accumulated interest rates for some time to come. The inaction, resistance and opposition by many councils, including those of Liberal and Green and Socialist pedigrees, who have opposed time and time again proposals to build more housing supply in our local communities. The ongoing disregard of the big supermarkets, banks, energy and insurance companies in providing families with any form of meaningful hip pocket relief. And a decade of underinvestment and Victoria not receiving its fair share from the previous Abbott, Turnbull and Morrison Liberal governments have all combined to create the cost of living crisis many Victorians are now experiencing. And we know there is no greater issue, as I said, Speaker, to workers, to families, young people, retirees and indeed every household when it comes to the cost of living. And it's only right that this House and this Parliament should focus all of its attention on this priority issues for Victorians, which is why I've moved the motion. But in stark contrast, Speaker, while this Victorian Labor Government has sought to best utilise this MPI time to focus on these issues that matter to Victorians, I'm absolutely flabbergasted that the Victorian Liberal National Party have sought to utilise their time in the Legislative Council earlier today to talk about something that is entirely irrelevant. Did they use their time in the Legislative Council to talk about more jobs for Victorians?
Order.
Did they utilise their time to talk about how they're going to improve health and wellbeing, access and costs for Victorians?
Polwarth.
Did they utilise their time to talk about how they're going to build more homes and make homes more affordable for Victorians? Or anything to do with cost of living? Did they actually do that, colleagues?
Member for Polwarth.
The answer is no, Speaker. Absolutely no. Because what we witnessed earlier today by a totally irrelevant motion moved by the recycled leader of the opposition in the Legislative Council, Mr David Davis, had nothing to do with any of these important issues. In fact, it had all to do with changing the standing orders of the Legislative Council. And more specifically, that the following time limits, and I'm sub-quoting all this, apply to members.
A point of order, member for Brighton.
Habits die hard. Speaker, as much as discussing the Legislative Council's standing orders would bore all of us, I don't think it relates to the motion that the member himself has moved on relevance.
I'd ask members not to raise points of order that are going to interrupt members' times. The member was going to get to, I'm sure, the matter before the House.
That's right. Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate that. The point I was simply trying to make was while here in this chamber we are focusing as a government on the issues that matter to Victorians, cost of living, in the other House, in the other chamber, they're focusing on something totally irrelevant. That's the point I was trying to make. That is the point I was trying to make. And standing orders do not rank anywhere near the top tier issues of Victorians. It's cost of living all the way. But the reality is, Acting Speaker, there's only one political party in this place that can form government and that can take that action on cost of living, and that is the Victorian Labor Government, whether it's on education, on health, on transport, on housing. We have been continuing to take that real action that matters to make a difference, a tangible difference to people's lives, when standing orders in the other place make no tangible difference whatsoever. Because as we've seen, the fact is, Speaker, that we have never seen and we never will see a Liberal National Party stand up for and support cost of living relief that we as a government have put forward. Later this year, Speaker, yours truly will be turning 40 later on this year. But so too, you know what the other 40th birthday is for this year? Back to the Future, the Back to the Future movie franchise. And in the spirit of Back to the Future, in going into the substance of the motion here, Speaker, I'd like to take us all on a bit of a trip back on Doc and Marty McFly's iconic DeLorean, which the member for Narrackan, I'm sure, used to probably ride in one once upon a time. And I've ascertained a copy of Gray's Sports Almanac, Speaker. Gray's Sports Almanac from Back to the Future, which tells us all about what you will get again if you have a Liberal government coming back into power. You only have to look as far back as when they were last in government to judge how they're going to carry on when they ever, God forbid, get the benches of government again in this state. And Speaker, in that almanac book, when I was flicking through it, you know what we saw in an alternative reality like Biff Tannen in Part 2 to Back to the Future, where we had someone who closed a local school and built a casino? Sounds like another party in this state from once upon a time. We had the now Leader of the Opposition commit to 100 new schools. When we heard in question time today, they only committed to 4 before the last election, 2 or 3 of which were in his own electorate that he didn't even commit to. The Deputy Leader of the Liberals, who I reckon has got a strong resemblance there to Biff Tannen, I reckon the member for Bulleen's a bit of a Marty McFly as well, if I may say. He came out to support the $400 school bonus, which has never happened, and they've never committed to retaining. The Shadow Minister for Education has come out to say they're going to support the ongoing retention of free kinder, which still hasn't happened, and they haven't guaranteed the retention of, as far as I'm aware. The Shadow Minister for Education as well has announced that, yes, high fee paying schools should also pay payroll tax, just like public schools have to as well. That hasn't happened either. The Shadow Minister for Public Transport, who is at the table as well, he came out and announced that they're going to build the Metro Tunnel. They're going to build the level crossing removal projects, and they're going to improve the Upfield line in my community, which they actually looked at closing when they were last in government. That was before, and it never happened under a Labor watch. Member for Bulleen. The Shadow Minister for Employment and Industrial Relations has come out to call for and support pay rises for nurses, paramedics and police officers, which has never happened on the watch of a Liberal National Government. The Shadow Minister for Health has announced new upgrades to the Northern Hospital, the Austin Hospital. I'm going through, for the benefit of the Deputy Leader, I'm actually going through all the things the Victorian Labor Government is doing when it comes to cost of living and what the Liberals are not doing. I'm specifically going to the substance of the motion to contrast what we're doing and what you'll never do, Deputy Leader.
Pascoe Vale, through the chair.
Shadow Minister of Health.
Through the chair.
I apologise, Speaker. The Shadow Minister for Health, Speaker. Remember the time that they actually called out the Morrison Liberal government's freezes to Medicare and bulk billing? You don't, because it never, ever happened. It never happened. And the Shadow Minister for Health, when they announced and copied our policies around paramedic practitioners, the pharmacy pilot, virtual emergency departments, free nursing and midwifery studies, it's never happened. It's only happened on a Labor watch. The Shadow Minister for Energy, whoever that is these days, announced that they're bringing back the SEC and publicly owned energy. In stark contrast, they've already said they're going to sell it off again, Speaker. And the Shadow Treasurer, who's here as well, the guy who got promoted, the Shadow Treasurer, he's come out to announce an even bigger build, again, of the Metro Tunnel, Westgate Tunnel, North East Link, and the big school builds, all the schools in my community that Labor governments have delivered. The upgrades, the $21 million Strathmore Steam Hub, the $17.8 million Coburg High Technology Hub, which is opening next year, $14 million for John Faulkner College Hub,
South West Coast.
$9 million for Glenroy Secondary College upgrades. They never would have happened under a Liberal government, and they never will. When it comes to energy, all they're talking about is the most expensive form of energy, Speaker, and that is nuclear energy that Peter Dutton is seeking to advocate through and seek a mandate for at this federal election. The Shadow Minister for Planning, I'm glad he's in here, the member for Polwarth, has come out to announce a policy of new social, community and affordable homes. We're waiting to hear about this policy, Speaker. He's talking every day about housing and planning. They still have not come out with a policy to build more homes. I'm listening, member for Polwarth, and I'm waiting to hear for your policy. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you. I'm waiting to hear from the opposition policy when it comes to their housing policy that will make housing and renting more affordable. We've put the plan out there on what we want to achieve in that regard. The $6 billion big housing build for 12,000 new social, community and affordable homes. The housing statement, the plan for Victoria. We have a vision, we're investing, we're taking action, and these guys are standing irrelevantly by the sidelines. And again, it's all in the almanac, which I'm happy to provide a copy of.
Member for Pascoe Vale is not to use props.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, and when it comes to education, no, it's a policy document. Thank you, Member for Polwarth. When it comes to education, you don't need to look any further than education to look at the stark difference between what a Labor government does to make education more affordable and what the Liberal National governments do to make it more unaffordable and inaccessible. Early childhood, like I touched on, Speaker, we're rolling out Best Start, Best Life, including free kinder for 3 and 4-year-olds, because we know children up until the age of 5, 80% of their brain and well-being and emotional regulation develops. And we know the more we invest in the early childhood years, the more of a better opportunity they will have later on in life. Saving families $2,600 per child per year for 3 and 4-year-olds. And the Liberals cannot guarantee that if they got into government, they would match that or retain that. To the contrary, they would cut it at the first opportunity. They will cut it. And they're welcome to get up to the dispatch box and dismiss that and tell me otherwise. But they won't. They won't, Speaker, because everything's on the table. And Speaker, when it comes to local kinders, they've never invested in any local kinder in my community. We're upgrading the Derby Street Children's Centre, Pascoe Vale Community Centre, Turner Street Kinder that my kids used to go to, Doris Blackburn Kinder, Shirley Robertson Kinder and Dunstan Reserve Kinder in Brunswick West, all being upgraded by the Labor government, making kinder more accessible to more families in our community. It's also across the state, as the Minister for Education touched on today in question time, we've invested over $1.9 billion to upgrade state-of-the-art schools and facilities so all students can have access to the quality learning facilities they deserve. One of those in my community was the $18 million redevelopment of Pascoe Vale Primary School, one of the oldest primary schools in our community, which we've just completed the redevelopment of, which again never would have happened under a Liberal national government. Never. School saving bonus. They've been very quiet about the school saving bonus and what their plans would be around the future school saving bonus. In my community, it's saving significant amounts of money for local families. Across the state, $136 million has been saved. In my electorate, it's $700,000 saved by local families. $260,000 for Coburg High, $132,000 for Pascoe Vale Girls College and much, much more. We've delivered 50 million school breakfasts, over 1,000 schools. We've expanded the Glass for Kids program for all schools. We're delivering and continue to deliver the free dental in schools program. Will the opposition continue that program? Smile Squad. I just visited a recent Smile Squad at my old primary school, Coburg West Primary, last week, and locally it's 7,000 chair visits that have been administered and seen by the Smile Squad since recent years, delivering young children with oral checks, teeth cleaning, x-rays, fluoride and varnish applications, sealants, dietary advice and free follow-up treatments. But will the Liberals discontinue that program? They're welcome to advise the House today. But it's also so many other programs. We've heard the Shadow Cabinet Secretary, Mr Joe McCracken, talk about this and foreshadow many of these possible cuts. And I quote, "We saw what Campbell Newman did in Queensland. He cut extremely, but he lasted for one term." So I guess it's really difficult balancing act of how much you cut, what do you cut, what services do you live without and what you can't. It's going to have to be, I suspect, a wholesale audit of what's going on in government where we can make the efficiencies. Those are the conversations I think we're going to have first. They're already having those conversations. They've got a Shadow Minister for Transition to Government measuring the curtains in the Premier's office. And all the while, when they were last in government for any meaningful time, they sacked 8,000 teachers. And they closed schools in my community in particular, Oak Park High, Hatfield High, Coburg High, Newlands High, Hatfield High, Fawkner Technical College, Fawkner North Primary, Glenroy High School, Coburg Technical School, East Coburg Primary, Merliston Primary and East Brunswick Primary were all schools that were closed by the Kennett Liberal government in the 1990s. That got me got myself and many others interested in politics in the first place to be in this place, and I'll do everything I can to stop you guys ever from being in government again.